Welcome to 7:30. As we go to air tonight, a frightening drama is continuing in downtown Sydney. A group of hostages, we aren't sure how many, are trapped inside a cafe held by at least one gunman. His motives are unknown, his demands unclear, and the outcome uncertain. Authorities fear that this is the type of lone wolf terrorist attack they've long anticipated, and it's attracting attention around the globe. Our reporters Adam Harvey and Sean Rubenstein Dunlop have been on the story all day.
And we are making the difficult but necessary decisions in order to get us there.
Matthias Cormann there. Now, just before we go on, I'll mention a tweet that New South Wales Police have just issued in the last minute or so. A police operation is underway in Martin Place in Sydney CBD.
OK, I just want to stop just for a moment and pause you there. We've just got some breaking news. There's a police operation underway in the heart of the city. One block of Martin Place has been cordoned off and several police vehicles are at the scene. An ABC reporter has seen one officer with a weapon drawn.
Just here at Channel 7, all of the staff here are being told to get away from the window.
And this is frightening and chilling stuff. What you're watching is live. It's happening here in Martin Place, 30, 40 metres from where we're standing. We have cameras all over this for you now. We understand where those police are. That's on the corner of Elizabeth Street and Martin Place. Even they're moving away now. So
guns have been drawn.
Got to move. 100 metres that way, please. Move now. Let's go, guys. It's closed. Yeah, we're packing Let's move. Yeah, look like you're packing up. Let's go.
Sarah Gerrithy is the ABC reporter in Martin Place, and we're crossing to her now. What can you see?
There are dozens and dozens of police. Some are very heavily armed in helmets and Kevlar suits. There's a heavily armoured police vehicle here as well. Over the last little while, I've been moved further back from the scene, but when I was allowed a little closer, I could see inside the Lindt building a woman with her hands up against the glass.
I walked up to the door and then everyone was sitting down and the door was locked, which is pretty weird because it's never locked. And there was one guy walking around with a hat and a beard.
There's about 15 people in there and they're all up against the wall with their eyes closed and all their hands up against the glass. There's an ISIS flag in the window.
Now that's a
flag
it appears to be a flag. We're not going to make a call on that just yet, but that's a lady in a Lindt apron, so we assume that's a worker. Eyes closed, she would be in all sorts of trouble there right now.
The first pictures were the pictures of the windows, with the people, their hands against the windows. Straight away, there were 3 people that I knew. Seeing one of the girls there who's new, she's only been there about a week and a half.
We have an armed offender in premises holding an undisclosed number of hostages in the city.
The taking of hostages is awful enough, but it's the sight of the black flag and its association with Islamic extremism that is truly chilling.
We've moved to a footing that would be consistent with a terrorism event.
We don't yet know the motivation of the perpetrator. We don't know whether this is politically motivated, although obviously there are some indications that it could be.
We are being tested today in Sydney. The police are being tested, the public is being tested, but whatever the test, we will face it head on. We will get through this, but importantly now, our thoughts and prayers are with those who are caught up in the situation, and we say to them, we are with them.
I would gladly swap places with them. I don't want to be out here. Being out here is terrible. I don't know what's happening. I'm 2 blocks away from them. I don't know what's happening.
We don't know much. We know that a crime has taken place. We know that the people who've undertaken that crime are armed, and we know that they're holding people against their will. The last thing we know is that they are politically motivated in some way. They want to demonstrate a message, and the message they've chosen to demonstrate so far is the holding up of an Islamic flag. That's all we know.
And I deliver this message to you, especially the people of Australia.
The great fear is that this is the event that's been willed on by Islamic extremists.
Takbir! Takbir!
After anti-terror raids in September, it was reported that extremists planned to grab and execute a member of the public, possibly in Martin Place. At the time, former ASIO chief David Irvine spoke of his fears.
Our principal concern for more than a decade has been the threat of terrorism by extremists adhering to a particularly violent interpretation of Islam. The intent is to punish, to foment social upheaval, to destroy the public's confidence in their governments. It is a doctrine of brutality, as we have seen. It's a doctrine of hate, and I think it's a doctrine of inhumanity. A recurring nightmare has been, for me anyway, has been the so-called lone wolf, often radicalised over the internet and who has managed to avoid coming across our radar.
People are talking about this as a terrifying incident, wondering whether they should pull children out of daycare. So regardless of who has undertaken this crime, it has had an impact of spreading fear and making us think about terrorism.
Muslims in Australia are very concerned that they, as Australians, are being tainted and marred by individuals who are undertaking criminal activities of this nature. This has nothing to do with Muslims as Australians. In fact, we would say that we don't even apologise for the person, but we certainly condemn the act as every Australian would do so.
Police have identified the person they believe is responsible for today's siege. They've asked us not to name him, so as to not further aggravate the situation. He is known to police. And then a breakthrough. Mid-afternoon, 3 of the hostages trapped in the Lindt Café escaped.
You can see there one person with an apron around him appeared to be a man running out of that fire door.
I can confirm that 3 people have now emerged from the location in Martin Place. The first thing that we will do is make sure that they are okay, and then we will work with these people to find out some more information.
With 5 hostages now freed, police won't say how many others remain inside. They say they're negotiating with the gunman.
What does he want? What does he want?
There is speculation about what he might want, but we have to deal with him on the level of police negotiation. We cannot be engaged in any speculation, but let it also be reassured that we are monitoring all forms of communication, whether that is Facebook or Twitter, for any information that might assist. And again, I put out that plea and that message. If anybody does have any information, please let us know. It's really important that you pass it on, because even a smallest snippet of information might be vital.
With me now from the edge of the exclusion zone at Martin Place in Sydney's CBD is reporter Sean Rubenstein-Dunlop. Sean, what's the latest?
Lee, it's been about 3.5 hours since the last of the hostages we saw made their way out of the Lindt Café in Martin Place. As we just saw, 5 hostages in total have made their way out of the cafe. It looks as though they escaped rather than being released by the gunman. We're told by police that they've been talking to those hostages and trying to find out from them whether indeed that was the case. Now, other things that have changed in the last half hour or so include a number of buildings in the area, in the direct vicinity of the Lindt Café, being reopened, some people being allowed back in, including at the Channel 7 studios, which look directly across into the Lindt Café. One journalist tweeting from there says he can see right now a group of hostages, I'm just looking at those tweets now, huddled at one end of the Lindt Café. One is covering the window at the end with an apron. They say they can see about 15 hostages inside at the moment. That number not confirmed by police. They say they're getting conflicting information about the number of hostages inside there. Their faces described as pained and strained, eyes red and raw. One young man can be seen with his head in his hands. So by all accounts, still an incredibly tense and live situation.
Sean, what about, just paint a picture for us of the environment where you are. Like, how would you describe the police presence now? And also, are members of the public hanging around too?
Look, I've got to say, Lee, it's been a completely surreal scene here. It's a city in lockdown. Major streets all across the CBD shut down. Buildings in lockdown or evacuated throughout the day. People spent hours locked in their offices, not knowing what was going on. A real mix of people. Huge crowds have gathered at the various police blockades, and there's a kind of a stunned, anxious silence as people watch on, trying to get a glimpse of what's happening at the Lindt Café. But quite a bizarre scene in a way too. Others taking selfies. Some have bought beers and planted themselves in the gutter to watch on. You know, we're seeing office workers talking to students and all kinds of people gathering and trying to get a sense of what's happening. But we were here when the siege broke out, and initially it was thought to be an armed robbery. But when that black flag was first raised, I've got to say, you could feel the terror spreading through the city. It was palpable. We spoke to people who'd been nearby at the time. They were visibly shaking. They were very upset.
Sean, thank you for that. We'll come back to you later in the program just to check in again, and I'll explore that question about the flag a little more now. As we've heard, police and politicians are being very careful not to ascribe motive, although the New South Wales Police Commissioner says the force is on, quote, footing consistent with a terrorist event. Those disturbing images that Sean referred to there of hostages being forced to hold up a black and white flag in the cafe window have, of course, raised a potential link to Islamic extremism and violence. With me now from Melbourne is Professor Greg Barton, the Director of the Global Terrorism Research Centre at Monash University. Professor, what was that black flag that was held up in the window?
Lee, the black flag was the Shahada, the statement of faith. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. It's mainstream for all Muslims. It's the central creed of faith. But in recent decades, it's been used, white letters on black banner, as a call to arms for jihadi groups. And the way it was presented, it looked like the banners we've seen in Syria, Iraq, used by Jabhat al-Nusra. It's not quite the Islamic State banner that has its own distinct logo, but it seemed to be implying a connection with Islamic State. So therefore, what does that, the use of that flag suggest to us about the gunman? It suggests that he's responding to that call from Islamic State to carry out attacks where you can with what you have, and to make sure they're videoed, and to make sure you put the black battle banner in the video frame. So he appears to be locating himself as a supporter of Islamic State. What's the difference between when people would use an Islamic State flag and then this flag? Why would you choose to go with one or the other? Look, apparently the gunman has been calling for somebody, as one of his demands, to bring him a proper Islamic State flag. So it appears he didn't have one. They're probably rather hard to come by in Australia at the moment. And so he did the next best thing. He used a banner that suggested an association with a jihadi group. But he clearly seemed to be making that association. The fact that he had hostages pressing their hands against the window, holding this thing up for hours, means it's no accidental reference. We heard in the story that was on earlier that authorities had feared this type of attack. In your view, is this attack or this incident consistent with the types of attacks that we've seen Islamic State encourage around the world? It certainly is, Lee. The one new twist, though, is the use of hostage-taking, which is a very worrying development because these things tend to get copied. And the big question that hangs in the air, is this just one of a series of sporadic lone wolf attacks, or is this the beginning of a wave, a cascading wave of lone wolf attacks around the world? And no one knows the answer to that. We have to prepare for the worst scenario.
You say the hostage-taking is unusual. What is the more traditional type of attacks that these sorts of groups are engaged with?
Well, Woolwich is the sort of attack we were bracing ourselves for. Drummer Lee Rigby run down with a small hatchback and then his throat slit, and all filmed on a phone camera, broadcast around the world, with calls from Islamic State to do that, but have the Islamic State flag present. Apparently that's what Nouman Haider had in mind when he went to Endeavour Hills Police Station back in September, and we saw elements of that in Ottawa and Montreal. That sort of thing we're prepared for. The police trained for hostage situations and they're well prepared for them, but this is a worrying development all the same.
Has there been any chatter that you're aware of on Islamist websites claiming any responsibility or ties to this attack or this gunman?
I'm not aware of anything yet, but it's interesting that the Islamic State official electronic magazine, Dubik, in its 5th most recent issue, made direct reference to Nouman Haider's case and claimed that. They also claimed Ottawa and Montreal. And so no doubt we can expect their next issue will be claiming this as well. That's how they leverage these things. They may not orchestrate them centrally, but they're quick to claim credit, and they're hoping that people will follow in copycat fashion.
So there's a degree of opportunism there.
There certainly is. I mean, the Islamic State's very canny about the way they motivate people and the way that they claim credit for what's happening.
The ABC is one of numerous media organisations today contacted by hostages involved in this. Some of them have also, or at least one that we're aware of, a woman purporting to be one of the hostages has posted an update on Facebook. What do you make of the degree of communication that's emanating from the hostage centre?
Well, it suggests that the main intent was to get attention and to have media attention. So for this gunman to get his hostages to call various media outlets suggests he desperately wants attention. And of course, that begs the question, should we deny him that? I don't think that's realistic, but the way we frame this discussion is very important. And so far, things have gone well. So
what is the correct way then to frame a discussion like this?
Well, he is trying to act as a hero and say to younger men, look, follow me. This is a great act. See how famous I am. See how much the world pays attention. And it's good that we've had Muslim community leaders speak out and say, this is not in the name of my faith. This is not us. And we've had a fairly neutral tone from the police commissioners, from the premiers, from the Prime Minister. That's the appropriate way to play this. We can't deny it's happened, but let's not make it, not give it any notoriety or regard it as something spectacular.
This is heading towards the 10th hour. What type of options would police be considering to resolve this situation?
Well, the first thing to understand, Lee, is that the police have to prioritise the safety of the hostages. That means they're not telling us the operational details. They have a lot of information which they're not sharing with us quite appropriately at the moment. They're going to prioritise safety, so that means if this thing carries on over midnight into tomorrow, that doesn't matter as long as they're keeping the hostages safe. They're hoping that talking with the gunman and negotiating will lead to some sort of peaceful back down. There are signs that may be possible given he wants this media attention, but they're also preparing for the worst case scenario. But they're not going to rush in. We saw a horrible culmination to another hostage event in Nairobi last year where military rushed in and it was havoc. We're not going to make that mistake here, I don't think.
We know that the National Security Committee of Cabinet held 2 meetings today. What's its role in a situation like this?
Its role ultimately is to be that interface between the security agencies, including the police, and the democratic process. I mean, we had this call in recent months to change counter-terrorism legislation. That's gone through. This same group of people will be asked to consider whatever lessons learnt, whether that has to result in new legislation or new allocation of resources. The upping of the terror alert level has given more resources towards this, and that's one of the things that came out of this committee meeting. So it's the interface between the democratic legislator, including with shadow ministers, and the authorities who can't make laws and can't change policy.
Greg Barton, we very much appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.